last night, we heard over and over again that there is mounting evidence on the interlinkages between the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris goals. It's becoming clear that the SDGs cannot be fully realized if we do not look at the impacts of climate change on the development pathways that countries are pursuing. Similarly, striving for the 1.5 degrees goal of the Paris Agreement and the net zero emissions by 2050 requires fundamental transformation and transitions across all sectors. And that will have impacts on people, on our ecological systems, and those pathways need to take into account development benefits and the SDGs. We have our panelists online as well. And so the question that we want to uncover here is, where are we vis-a-vis translation of that understanding and knowledge? If you are online, could you please mute yourself? Thank you. So the question that we want to uncover here is, given the understanding we have on the important interlinkages between these various issues, where are we vis-a-vis this understanding and evidence translating into concrete action and synergistic approaches on the ground at all levels, local, national, and global? What are some of the key policy areas with the most potential? What is the progress we see within those policy areas? What are some challenges and trade-offs, and how can we overcome that? So to ignite the conversation, we have a panel of distinguished speakers. We will first start with a keynote statement from Ms. Mamphela Ramphel. Welcome. And following that, we will have a moderated discussion with a panel of experts from a variety of sectors and thematic areas. So without further ado, let's get us started. I have the pleasure of handing over the floor to Ms. Ramphel for your keynote statement. Over to you, Ms. Ramphel.
Thank you very much. It is a great privilege and responsibility to talk to you at this pivotal moment in human history. Multiple planetary emergencies upon us call us to make critical choices that will define the future we bequeath to generations after us. Will they thank or curse us? The choice is entirely in our hands. I have modified the title of my keynote input to signal my discomfort with the low level of ambition embedded in the UN Agenda 2030, which focuses on SDGs. As Thomas Legrand so eloquently spelled out in his 2021 book entitled Politics of Being, this is what he says. The UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development does not say what is wrong in our cultural software and how might it be transformed, but focuses on symptoms rather than root causes of the spiritual disease being global inequity and an unhealthy planet. Transformation is possible only if we change the current development paradigm. We have to shift to focusing on being rather than on having. My African roots call us to learn that to be human means being interconnected and interdependent with other humans. Ubuntu tells us that humanity has meaning only if affirmed by other human beings. Modernity and its culture of defining the status of individuals, of families and societies by what they have is antithetical to the culture of being, which is Ubuntu. This is the culture that governed the very first human civilization in Africa. The culture of consumerism promoted by modernity is at the heart of our spiritual disease and planetary crisis. We must make the cultural shift now to enable us to achieve the transformation that we yearn for. Transformation would lead to a deep human, social, and environmental regeneration. The Club of Rome founder, Aurelio Piche, in his 1984 book with Buddhist monk and philosopher Daisa Ikeda, entitled Before It Is Too Late, called for a human revolution, which he defined as a change of course rather than the achievement of a goal. For Piche, the human revolution is the most pressing task. It is the elevation and reformation of the inner spiritual life. The human revolution is impossible unless the subconscious world is altered. And since the human revolution is key to positive action leading to the adoption of a new cause and revival of human fortunes, we must do whatever it is in our power to help set it in motion before it is too late. That was 1984. Transformation is possible only if we appreciate the importance of a shift in paradigm from the current development model that seeks to promote trade-offs between prosperity and well-being for all on one hand, and from prosperity and well-being for all, which is a contradiction in terms, because well-being for all is essential to life itself. Transformation is not possible in a world based on competition rather than collaboration, divisions between the haves and the have-nots rather than the equality and human dignity, domination of developing countries, so-called, and developed countries, so-called. Well-being instead of GDP is already being used to great effect as a measure of success in countries such as New Zealand, Costa Rica, Iceland, and others in the Nordic region. We must all move towards that. Transformation is not possible for as long as powerful oil companies such as Total and DIG continue to prospect and bid for oil extraction in one of the few remaining lungs of our planet, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Humanity must come together to defend this irreplaceable global commons. We must provide alternative resources of revenue for the Congo to emerge from its extreme poverty by loosening the grip of extractive former colonial master countries, as well as other others who are extracting rare earths from that country. We have less than 8 years to go to 2030. We are far off track from achieving these modest goals. Wisdom politics based on learning to live our destiny as a people who celebrate our interdependence and interconnectedness would usher in a wiser civilization. We have all the material resources, ancient and scientific knowledge we need to make the very low base of UN Agenda 2030 happen. But we lack the wisdom of a civilization that, to quote Legrand again, would know that by organizing itself in a way that honors the highest values and waters the best seeds in everyone, truth, freedom, justice, respect for life, happiness, love, peace, it could best support its flourishing and that of society's members. Are we ready for transformative action wherever we are today? I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Raphael, for those inspiring words and for reiterating that transformation is indeed possible. However, it will require fundamental changes in the patterns of development that we see currently. You mentioned cultural evolution and the role that human society plays as a whole. Thank you so much for those key remarks. Now we will move on to the moderated discussion. First, I will ask all the panelists to briefly introduce themselves. We have a fantastic panel of experts here, and we want to hear from each of them as part of the introduction. What does a nexus approach mean to them within the context of the work that they do? So first, let me start with Ms. Maria Neira, the Director of Public Health and Environment, the World Health Organization. Maria, over to you.
Thank you. A very short introduction and very pleased to be with you. I agree that this is a very, very critical moment. Yes, we need to change completely and transform our society. And we are convinced that health can be this motivation. Health can be maybe part of the solution and probably the one that will give a very strong and positive motivation to the society to change all of those critical obstacles that we have at the moment and that are making our society so different to the one we would like to see. We want a very healthy society. You want me to introduce, or I will give the floor to other panelists, or you want to go into deep discussion on that?
Thanks,
Sure.
Maria. We will have a chance to dig deeper into the conversation around health and society. Soumya Joshi?
Yes, I
Head of
hope you
Division
can
of
hear me.
Sustainable Environment Institute, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Soumya Joshi. I am the head of division at Stockholm Environment Institute, which is a think tank, a global think tank that bridges policy and science. In terms of what nexus means to me, that is very much related to the division I lead, which is around SDG synergies, climate. It's looking at industry and energy transitions, as well as traceability in global supply chains. So what is underpinning all of this is, I think, the red thread of data. And I would like to highlight that when we look at SDGs and the nexus approach, because we are learning more and more today about how, a health crisis is impacting people's livelihoods, or alternatively, the rare earth mineral crisis is impacting our push towards decarbonization. These are very, very critical areas of trade-offs and synergies, which I think with the proper use of data and science, we can make much more progress on. So I'll stop there to let other panelists speak, and then we can dig deeper later.
Thank you, Soumya, and welcome. Mr. Jan Vavavuri, the former mayor of the city of Helsinki and senior advisor on urban development.
Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for this unique opportunity. As you already mentioned, I'm the former mayor of the city of Helsinki, which is the capital of Finland, and now I work as a senior advisor for NREP, which is the biggest real estate developer in the Nordic countries. As a mayor, the Nexus approach meant that our goal should be to evaluate every city decision based on its SDG impacts and relationship to climate targets. This may sound simple, but in many cases, there just wasn't enough data or understanding to achieve true value of the Nexus impacts. By purposefully setting targets and re-evaluating our strategic goals as a city at every step, we got better at it. And then as a senior advisor and an urban advocate in the real estate sector, the Nexus approach means that all of our portfolio and new projects must recognize the Nexus value. it's not only about reporting climate targets or evaluating projects through the SDG framework, but to truly understand impacts and secondary impacts our industry has in the world and how to push boundaries in a way that matters, and at the same time make it as a successful business. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jan. Mr. Hitesh Vaida?
Hi, good morning and greetings from India. I don't know what time zones we are in different areas, but again, greetings from India. I'm Hitesh Vaidya. I'm a director, National Institute of Urban Affairs in India. This is a Apex Institute guiding policy initiatives with the government of India. Our major role is bridging the gap between the policy and practice. So we are the platform where we talk about practitioners and try to come up with an enabling environment at a policy level. Your question, and I'll be very clear why I'm looking at only urban lens, because we are talking about cities. So when we talk about cities as engines of economic growth, I think that's the area we need to really change the difference. Cities are no longer engines of economic growth unless they are substantiated by two more engines, the engines of sustainability and engines of inclusivity. And if we really want to achieve the real SDGs at the ground, then all three engines have to be thought together in a cohesive way. And that is the only nexus if we can adopt, we can achieve the SDGs in full form. So only engine of economic growth, that definition has to change now. And that's where I stop it here right now. But I'll just quote my finance minister when she said, when we are going to be a 50% urban, and which means like we will be adding up 416 million people by 2060. They said we need to get out of the business as usual approach. And I think that also Memphila Mrempele had highlighted in her keynote address. So I fully agree with that. But I stop here at this moment of time and let other panelists talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hitesh. Ms. Chioma Oguwego?
Thank you very much, and good morning from London. My name is Choma Agwebo, and I'm the Executive Director at TECHA NG. TECHA is an organization that bridges the technology gap for women and girls in Nigeria, but also focuses on problems that. So answering the question on just what the next is, but also in gap, I think for us it's about teaching women and to be able to assist in these by delivering to them the tools. But also
Chioma, there is a. I wonder if the connection is a little bit. You come in and go. I wonder if it gets better if you speak a bit closer to the mic.
Is this better?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Awesome. I was saying that I'm the Executive Director at TECHA NG, and we use technologies. We teach women and girls to use technologies. And so to answer the question on both the nexus and how we bridge the gap, we deliver to women the tools they need to function in these urban cities in a safe, productive, and efficient way. Our work is hinged on the SDG Goal 5, which focuses on the total advancement and promotion of women, because we believe that solving the climate, the climate challenge, or solving the urban crisis challenge, or solving any of these challenges cannot happen completely and wholesomely without carrying women along. And that's going to be the basis for my submissions today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chioma, and welcome. Now, over here in Tokyo, I am joined by Ms. Imelda Dada Bakudo.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Very pleased to meet all the panelists, my co-panelists. I am an example of Nexus work, perhaps. I wear several hats. In the program, I'm announced as co-chair of the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture, which is an alliance of all regional alliances that promote CSA. And we have our facilitation unit in Rome with the FAO headquarters. But I'm also the guiding force behind the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, which, if you remember, ASEAN is an Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the 10 countries of Southeast Asia, and we have been promoting climate-friendly practices specifically in the production of agri-food or in the transformation of agri-food. I'm also a research fellow of Stockholm Environment Institute, but my work really reflects the need to make interlinkages and make synergies. And I would love to cite some of the examples that we have been doing in order to do this, and possibly in order to achieve what our keynote speaker mentioned about Ubuntu. It's my favorite word, by the way. So hopefully I can share some examples later. Yeah.
Thank you, Imelda. And I also have the pleasure of sharing the stage with Mr. Wataru Suzuki. Over to you.
Thank you very much for your introduction. My name is Wataru Suzuki. I'm from Japan Biodiversity Fund of the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity in Montreal, Canada. So to me, the nexus approach means recognizing and understanding of the interconnections between global challenges and addressing them in a holistic way. So, and I'm particularly interested in the implication of the two food system and also water, sustainable production and consumption. And thank you. It's an honor to be in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining. Thanks for the introductions. What's interesting to me is that the nexus approach means different things from the perspective of different sectors and different areas of work that you're each involved in. So there is no one way of determining the definition of that, and this is a good way of commencing this discussion around a nexus approach across all sectors and policy areas. For the first round of questions, I thought it would be really interesting for our audience to hear about specific cases of progress and success stories within the areas that you're each involved in. So, Maria, let me start with you. The health sector in particular has been in the spotlight the past couple of years because of the COVID pandemic. And it's becoming ever more clear that health issues have profound impacts on all other issues, including the global economy, social issues, environment, climate change. How much of that understanding is turning into concrete synergistic action, for example, in designing policies and financial instruments and so on?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning from Geneva again. It's again a beautiful and very hot day in Europe. Yesterday in London, as you know, we hit the heat 41 degrees, which tell us it was a very strong signal again that we have a global warming and the health of the people was starting to be very much at front. And this might be a wake-up call for some to realize that we need to elevate the level of ambition and the speed for the responses we need here. Health has been up front, and we had the opportunity, all of us, to go, as our first speaker was very eloquently telling us, realizing that the symptoms are there, but as well the causes of, part of the causes of the pandemic were related as well with the lack of biodiversity that we are losing, is related as well to the fact that we are not respecting the boundaries between animal health and human health. We are deforesting, we are destroying our ecosystems, which are fundamental for our life. So in health, the positive part, and I understand that we need positive messages to motivate more action, is that there is now more awareness among our citizens that when we talk about climate change, it's not just something distant, something planetary and very philosophical, or something that will happen in next generation, but it's something that is happening now, and not only to the glaciers or the polar bears, but it's happening to humans and very, very quickly. So hopefully there is a sense of urgency that before it was not. And this is because health has been very much affected. On the other front, we realize as well that the positive part, which means that if you tackle the causes of climate change, if you go at fixing and understanding the causes, the root causes, and you realize that by doing so, you will generate so much health benefits, particularly in three transitions that we are trying to help to accelerate as much as possible. One, the transition to clean sources of energy. And this is for us one of the critical nexus that we are trying to support. The transition to clean, renewable, non-polluting sources of energy, because at the moment, the combustion of fossil fuels is killing 7 million people, premature deaths every year due to the pollution that this combustion is generating, contributing not only to the causes of climate change, but polluting the air we breathe. So this transition to renewable sources of energy is critical for us, clean sources of energy. The second transition that, again, we see positive results and we are trying to accelerate is the one on urban development. We want a healthy urban planning, and by using health, defining much better our cities, our urban environments, which at the moment are not set for protecting the health of our citizens and promoting opportunities and accelerating SDGs on equity and transforming the way we live at the moment. And the third transition is related to the way we produce, we consume, we waste our food. And if we can, we see positive signals on those transformations, the health will be there to accelerate that. As you can imagine, for the health, for human health, the nexus are so strong with all the SDGs. I mean, or at the contrary, I mean, all what we are trying to do in our society, if we don't have health, it will be totally failing. So maybe this health argument, as I was saying before, and the results we are getting on telling people, well, when you reduce your emissions, you bring cleaner air and your life will be much better and your children will be better protected. I think this can be one of the nexus we need to reinforce to obtain more support, commitment, and engagement by all, and more demand by the citizens themselves on accelerating SDGs, because otherwise they will not be healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you for highlighting again the important interlinkages between health and other issues, and giving us concrete examples of where you see progress from where you sit. Transition to renewable energy, urban development, sustainable consumption and production, food security, these are all issues that also are integrated within the conversation around health for human beings. So thanks for those remarks. Now, Soumya, over to you. The SEI has done a tremendous amount of research on integrated approaches, integrated planning, and really trying to help different stakeholders in understanding the sort of connections between the different SDGs and climate action. And you highlighted the importance of data. Where are we vis-a-vis the uptake of the importance of research and data on synergistic action?
That's a very good question. And right up front, I would like to draw everyone's attention to one of the tools that we've developed at SEI, and it's the SDG Synergies tool. It's a publicly available tool set where one can work directly, whether it's from industry, government, or civil society, to look at what are the SDG trade-offs and synergies. But I would like to give some concrete examples from our research, which I think highlight this nexus, the need to look at it from a nexus lens. The first is one of our platforms called trace.earth, which looks at the traceability of global supply chains. So it highlights, for example, how certain consumption choices in the global north, whether it's the consumption of beef, are directly linked to deforestation in the global south. Similarly, a lot of the products that we buy off our shelves here, how are they labeled? How are they shipped globally? What is the footprint? So through trace.earth, we have a very compelling platform that links or connects these dots. Another example of our research work is around industry transition. And here we have a leadership platform where we look at hard to abate sectors such as steel, cement, and how they can be produced in a greener way. Again, here, the things we touch upon with regard to the SDGs are ideas of circularity. How could the waste from one industry become a resource for another? How could we replace fossil fuel use, for example, with greener renewable energy or clean energy mix? These are very, very difficult sectors and choices that we're talking about, because especially when you look at what our keynote speaker suggested today about extractive industries and the decolonization of our whole worldview around this. This is what we want to highlight. And hence all the work we do at SEI around this research, we look at equity questions. So how is the resource map mapped onto, for example, the 1% and their carbon footprint, and how do we address that when we are going one by one down the SDG list? And finally, I would like to also highlight that through the work that we're doing with governments, both in the Nordic area, but also more internationally, we are coming up against some inherent contradictions baked into what our ideas around growth, around extractivism. And unless we challenge that, I don't think technology will provide us a silver bullet. The data that I mentioned earlier is very much about insight and connecting the dots, and from there moving towards decisive action. But without unearthing this inherent inequity of where the resources lie, whether it's rare earth minerals and that will fuel our electrification revolution here in the global north, are we repeating certain patterns? This is the question that I would like to leave you with there. Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya, for your insightful comments and for highlighting how there is progress in terms of the tools and data that we have available at our disposal to be able to make more informed decisions, but that's not enough. There's other questions such as equity that come into the equation, and we need to be mindful of that, and the work that we do with governments and other stakeholders need to consider those issues. Mr. Jan, now you were, from the perspective of local development, given your role as a mayor, I'm sure you were confronted with multiple priorities all the time. What's your experience vis-a-vis identifying the best areas for potential that with potential to maximize benefits, both from the socioeconomic issues, the SDGs, and climate action, from the perspective of local action and local planning?
Thank you. First of all, I think it's important to understand and underline that more or less every progress takes always place in the grassroots level. So the more practical outcome is wanted, and that is what we are wanting, the more local and city actions should be recognized. And also to understand that the more people to be engaged, the more cities should be in the forefront of action. And from this point of view, I'd like to start by giving as an example of progress the concept of voluntary local review of the SDGs, a movement which started in the city of New York 4 years ago, followed by the city of Helsinki, which has now grown to a global movement that there several hundred cities are submitting their voluntary local reviews to United Nations, which of course improves a lot the awareness of the SDGs. But giving some concrete examples of the areas where I see the best potential, I'd like to start by city planning and zoning. You could say that planning cities with a view to improving not just social inclusion, but also environmental sustainability has a major potential in realizing sizable local health, employment, and productivity benefits, while also minimizing cities' carbon footprints. Another one is digitalization in public services, which promotes access, participation, and education. And at the same time, there is a potential for energy saving, for example, cutting unnecessary traffic, reducing wait times, lag in bureaucracy, promoting positive efficiency, and so on.
Thank you, Jan, for those comments and for highlighting concrete examples of where we can find the most potential for maximizing co-benefits. Mr. Vaida, you're also involved in urban development. What's your perspective? What do we see from the point of view of urban development? How is this conversation around climate action and SDGs and the synergy between them is coming together when we talk about urban development? What are some signs of progress there?
Okay, thank you. Again, I'll come back to the question, but before that, I'll come back to the nexus question which you had, and I think this question also actually rely on the last and I'll question. So while India at one time, you all know we are aiming for 5 trillion economy or a 14 trillion economy by 2047. At the same time, we want to have a 2070 net zero. These two, one is a sustainability, and that is the challenge. And when we talk about climate action, and I particularly feel that economic development will happen only if we have this climate action contribute to the economic development. And that is what we are right now working. While we all talk about climate action, unless we break this climate action into a granularity of day-to-day operations of cities, we will not be able to achieve it. Right now, the language of climate action at the global level or a country level is much more different than the language which a practitioner at a city level understands. So at a city level, they understand the sectoral areas where we need to really start talking the climate language to the language of cities. And that's what I see across the country. The language has to be same because their global dictionary and the practitioners' dictionaries are two different dictionaries at this moment of time. What India has done is doing it, and what we are trying to look at it. We are coming up with we have done a lot of panelists before me talked about data. And I think that is the starting point to make any climate action. In India, as a government of India, with my ministry, what we started doing is we have looked at looking at cities and what type of climate action can be possible. We have come up with 126 cities, which is covering around 140 million people, around 30% of India's urban population. We looked at in 28 indicators, which were 5 broad buckets, which I think, and the broad buckets which we suggest, we are looking at this assessment of climate at the local level are the same which Jen and other people suggested. We are looking at urban planning and green cover. We are looking at mobility and air quality. We are looking at water management. We are looking at waste management, and we are looking at energy and green building. So we have started looking at these indicators, where the cities perform, and we have started labeling them, how capacity support can be provided to these cities. So create a roadmap with them based on the data, then provide a handholding and capacity support to them. Then look at where the projects can come up. So we are trying to look at a whole urban ecosystem approach and then look at finances to really do a climate action and all that. So you have to look at all the project cycle from the data to actually financing and monitoring the project. And that's what we are doing. India last 5 years have taken a lot of initiatives. While we spend 150 billion euros on urban infrastructure, 30 billion euros were specifically, and if I say, on the climate action across the country. So there has been a journey towards that. But if we really want to have climate action, because we have to build the capacities at the local level at different fronts. Because one of the things which we realized during our survey assessment framework, which we did at climate assessment framework, we realized that there are cities which are still not thinking about climate change. There are cities which have collected data, they have formed committees, have some technical agencies to start thinking about climate change. But there are some cities which have commitments made to their constituencies and have started some kind of a small actions. But there are right now there are no city which can showcase implementation of climate action on the ground. So we have cities which have initiated it. So there is a lot of work to be done on the ground if this SDGs, which I think again earlier panelists talk about, only 7 years have left. And if we want to achieve that 2030 agenda, forget about 2070 net zero, then these actions has to be grounded at a itself. 3% of the land is covered, whereas 70% of emissions are coming from the cities. So the action is going to be cities, and it has to be very, very clearly data, capacity, technology, finance, and integration of all these different elements which talk to each other on this thing. So cities has to be looked at especially rather than working on a siloed approach.
Thank you, Hitesh. This is really insightful in terms of the role that cities are currently playing in the movement on climate action and localization of the SDGs, but also the importance of granularity, that we need to get into a level of detail and define what does climate action mean in terms of the different contexts that the cities face, and how an integrated approach can be applied. Of course, we'll have an opportunity to talk about challenges in the next round. Now, Chioma, I will turn to you. Yes, we see you. You're a social entrepreneur, and the organization that you are involved in works with, it's around empowering women. Tell us, entrepreneurship is crucial to both climate action and the SDGs. How is this conversation around joint up action and synergistic approaches is coming together vis-a-vis entrepreneurship and women empowerment and gender?
Thank you very much for that question. I think for us, like I mentioned earlier, our ultimate goal is to ensure that we can equip women with the tools that they need to function in today's world. Some statistics from Nigeria show that we currently, unfortunately, have the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. Even more unfortunate is the fact that 60% of that number, and it's over 10 million, 60% of those 10 million children are girls, because we know that indices of inequality tilt more towards females, tilt towards women and girls. And so the work we do at TECHA is to equip women with these tools, whether it is going into peri-urban schools to teach vulnerable children how to use technology, whether it is bringing women together in communities so that they can trade with each other, so that they can work together, so they can co-found companies together and increase their economic leverage and increase their economic standing, whether it is championing things like digital rights, because as we start to talk about climate change, as we start to talk about protecting our planet, as we talk about reducing emissions, etc., We lean very heavily towards technology and towards artificial intelligence. But what's not being done is the intentional investment in ensuring that women are carried along, in ensuring that in the same way that men are leading these conversations, that we have women leading these conversations, that we have women planning for themselves. What we currently have are governments around the world thinking about from a male-centered lens, thinking about things like, artificial intelligence, thinking about machine learning, etc. But these machines are not learning the needs and the challenges and the peculiarities that women carry. And so for us, we hope that we're doing two things. One, strengthening the capacity of women, of adult women, to be able to advocate for themselves in this world today, but also raising a new generation of young people, of children who will become young people who are interested not only in technology and digital, but who are ethically bound from the training that they have received when they were youngsters. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that and for raising the importance of empowering women and gender equality. Imelda, now when we talk about climate action, often we focus on mitigation, adaptation, equally important. Can you talk to us about adaptation, resilience building a little bit more, and how we can enhance adaptation by looking at development co-benefits?
Thank you, Bahari, for the question. But before I address that, I would really like to share some very real experiences coming from the region that reflects the synergy and the nexus work that was mentioned by my co-panelists. For example, you asked a very important question, where are you in nexus work already, right? And I wanted to cite this example with the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network. 6 or 7 years ago, we started making a linkage with agriculture and climate change. To make the long story short, it took us 6 years for agriculture sector to realize that they're both part of the problem and therefore part of the solution. And one of the biggest output that we have from all these processes was to create a negotiation group that goes all the way to UNFCCC to shape policies at this highest level, at the multilateral environmental agreement level. But the experiences that we first endured, this turfing as an attitude where people say this is, negotiation is really often under ministries of environment and not other sectors. This is one of the challenges that we are facing. But fortunately, we have been through the years now recognized as an essential negotiation group under G77 in China, shaping policies on climate for agri-food systems. So the transformation took so slow, but it's there. Another thing that we did that's related to your question, perhaps, is that, you really have to look at your sector, whether you're working in cities, whether you're working at the rural areas, on possible existing policies within and outside of your sector, and use that, reallocate that in order to serve these linkages. And finally, we had a very good example of nexus work where we're just looking at lowering emissions, but at the same time, we wanted to recover from the pandemic. So we had a COVID-19 nexus recovery nexus where we wanted to ensure that there's adaptation, there's continuous economic gains for the farmers, and there's the potential to have lower emissions. So we cited a lot of different tools to do this. For example, alternate wetting and drying in rice is one, low emissions livestock, wherein enteric fermentation, fertilizers are used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the mitigation aspect. Now you want me to give a few words on adaptation. The main challenge that we are facing with adaptation in terms of policy proposal, it's very easy to promote adaptation because you are not imposing on smallholder farmers, right? To take on expensive emitting reducing practices. But at the same time, the challenge is measuring your contribution through adaptation. So we still need a lot of key performance indicators for adaptation on how it is going to contribute to national determined contributions, for example. But I'm not losing hope on adaptation because I think that the science is going forward and we will soon be able to quantify adaptation contributions in such areas as NDCs. It has to be, I think, just very attractive to policymakers where there's quantification of benefits.
Absolutely, quantification of benefits. And also, thanks for bringing us down to the ground with concrete examples of action that is happening. Mr. Suzuki, nature-based solutions and biological diversity. Traditionally, we've had isolated circles of global fora on SDGs, global fora on climate, global fora on biodiversity, but there's more and more recognition that we need to bring all of this together. We need to have one conversation around a holistic approach that also not only looks at climate action from the perspective of, let's say, renewable energy and typical sector mitigation sectors, but also biological diversity, nature-based solutions. What level of progress are we seeing from that side?
Thank you very much, Bahare, for excellent question. Yeah, I will try to illustrate those changes happening, as you mentioned. Yes, we used to discuss among ourselves for diversity and maybe climate change is someone else is talking about. But as you said, we are coming together, in particular, the agriculture and the food system. And Imelda mentioned about the low emission rice. It's very interesting concept that, yeah, so we usually use sustainable production or rice or something, but that's a maybe very similar expression of the same thing or very similar thing. So we are getting closer each other, I think. So having said that, so by 2050, we need to feed 2 billion more people, and that is 35 more population comparing today. And since 1980, 55% of increase of food production is at the cost of primary forest. So we definitely need to see or expect some trade-off to deal with the food production. At the same time, I also mentioned that over 80% of farmland is managed by 500 million small-scale farmers. So it is quite important to address the way the small-scale farmers are managing their farmlands. So, you know, it used to be agriculture policy, but now we need to talk about biodiversity and energy management at the production landscapes. So in that sense, I think the Satayama Initiative, which was proposed by United Nations University and Japanese government to make those landscape use in more sustainable way. So I think that could be, you know, one example of progress. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Suzuki. So this round was really about highlighting progress, and thank you so much to all the panelists for demonstrating that there is progress across all sectors and across a variety of stakeholders. But of course, when we talk about synergies, there's trade-offs. And then there's challenges that countries and different stakeholders are facing in terms of sort of identifying those trade-offs and overcoming challenges. Let's talk about that a little bit. Maria, from the perspective of the health sector and the synergy between health, climate action, and other SDGs, what are some of the challenges you're seeing, and what are some examples that can demonstrate we are overcoming those challenges?
Thank you. And I'm sure that all the colleagues, the panelists, will be able to produce a very long list of challenges, unfortunately. But again, let's be positive and see where we are facing those challenges and hopefully having some results. Clearly for us, one of the biggest challenges is the lack of recognition of the urgency of this matter. I mean, again, yesterday, the heat waves in Europe at the moment are creating a sense of alert. They are probably sensitizing the population here in this part of the world that this is affecting all of us, and we need to be better prepared to respond to this. And again, they saw the connections with the health, the human health, the health of their children and their families. So that might be helping to accelerate. Where we see one of the critical challenges is this transition to different sources of energy. And I think this is a critical issue for all of us. I mean, the SDG 7 is becoming one of the critical ones now. This access to clean, modern, affordable sources of energy will solve most of the issues, because if we are able to switch to different sources of energy, we will create more health, create better opportunities for human health. We will reduce all of those deaths that we have at the moment and cost for the health system related to exposure to these high levels of pollution. This will require as well to change our cities. This will require the way we live, we produce. It changed completely maybe as well the equity issue, because the poor people is the one that is paying the consequences of the prices of those fuels that we are using at the moment, while solar energy, for instance, or renewable energy in Africa, for instance, could be a very cheap solution if the technology and the knowledge and the demand will be there. So we see those challenges on not understanding the cost that not accelerating the transition to different sources of energy is, how much the health system is paying at the moment in terms of the externalities we are paying as the health system globally are enormous. That's why as well we are to motivate, and this is an example maybe of good results, to motivate our societies. We want to lead by example. So the health sector will be reducing our own carbon footprint. You know that altogether the medium and high level income countries, we are contributing to the greenhouse gases emissions. It represents the health sector contribution globally is around 7% of the total of the greenhouses emissions. And we want to lead by example by reducing that carbon footprint in our health system. That's something that is generating a very positive, motivating health professionals, and health professionals are still a very strong voice to convince others in society. So pediatricians, respiratory specialists, doctors, they recognize that the cases of asthma, they see that the respiratory diseases increase, they see lung cancer is very much linked to the poor quality of the air people is breathing. And therefore, this movement that we launched a few weeks ago on so-called decarbonizing, if you allow me to use that expression, the health system is something that will prove that we can do it in our hospitals, in our health systems. We can change completely the way we use energy. We have more efficiency. We reduce packaging, plastic use, and the procurement of our drugs. We provide food that they will be more locally produced. So we will demonstrate that we can reach net zero on the health system, hopefully by 2040. And if we do so, I think it will be a very strong motivation. And the second positive initiative is related to the electrification of healthcare facilities in sub-Saharan Africa, but we want to expand it to the rest of the world by solar panels. So having the health sector being so close and so concretely linked to the access of clean energy sources and solar panels for healthcare facilities, I think again will help and contribute to accelerate this important nexus between health and energy, and moving and making sure that the health, the quality of the care at the healthcare facilities will be better, because you need electricity at the healthcare facilities. And at the moment, we don't have it in most of them in developing countries. Obviously, many other positive things going on, the adaptation projects for healthcare, more climate resilience units, but many of them. But I think the challenges are enormous, but it will take very little if we change our mentality and we switch to clean development. I think that the results will be immediate, particularly for health, will be so enormous, and will reduce the cost that people are using that cost now as an excuse not to invest most on mitigation, while we are already paying the externalities of the fact that we are still giving subsidies to fossil fuels, compromising the health of the people and the health of our, our lungs are suffering at the first front. Over.
Thank you, Maria. Incredibly important point about the cost of inaction, and how do we build a case for that in a way that is convincing, that if we don't act, there is a cost, and that's why we need to act now. And there's examples of rural electrification of hospitals, and that demonstrates clearly how there's benefits in making the transition on energy access and so on. Thank you so much. Soumya, again, data. In the conversation around trade-offs, data and analytical work plays a big role in assisting with identifying trade-offs and navigating those trade-offs. What are some challenges there, and how can we address that?
Thank you. I think one of the critical aspects we keep bumping into is that we spoke about a siloed approach when we look at individual SDGs, and then we move towards an interconnected understanding. It's the same when it comes to data and our mindset. One clear example of where we fail to do that is looking at the role of geopolitics. If we look today, the current crisis and the war that we are facing, not to mention also geopolitical situations in the global south, what is the knock-on effect that has on the coming food crisis, on the way we're taking steps backward in our move towards clean energy? So the role data can play here, and there is enormous amounts of data available already through the digitalization of services globally, is to connect different data sets. It's in the connecting of these data sets and providing an interoperable platform for them that we can generate true insights and really break away from this way of thinking that we can address one crisis at a time. And we are seeing this with very concrete examples. For example, you can check out Global Shipping Watch, which shows you a very innovative way in which data has been used to highlight how unsustainable our current consumption internationally is, and the movement of goods and the carbon footprint of that. And when you mention trade-offs, data is also very good at teasing out the inherent contradictions of how we think of our carbon footprint locally. So for example, if you were to speak to people in Sweden or the Nordics, they would tell you that we're actually meeting our targets as we go towards 2030. But what about, you know, scope 3 emissions? What about the enormous impact of our consumption choices here in the global south? How do we address that? And now more and more data is emerging from different areas highlighting this contradiction of action that is taking place in one geography and its impact in another. And an example that I will leave you with is an initiative we have at SCI called Adaptation Without Borders. And this highlights some of these inbuilt contradictions and how to address them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia, for being concrete and again for providing examples on how we can overcome some of these challenges. Jan, over to you now. So from the local perspective and local development, how do we look at the conversation of trade-offs and challenges? What are some examples of that you can highlight here in terms of overcoming some of these challenges?
Thank you. I'd like to start by paying attention to the lessons learned from the pandemic, which of course, unfortunately, it's not over yet. But we very often pay attention to what it changed. Of course, it changed a lot, and it will change a lot. But I think it's maybe even more important to understand that it also revealed a lot. So you could say that cities, regions, countries, societies which were successful before the pandemic were also most probably able to walk through the pandemic with relatively smaller losses. But there, the key is to understand the holistic view of being successful. So those cities, they were at the same time smart, sustainable, resilient, safe, functional, and so on. So in order to tackle a big global disruption, actually ask the societies to have a comprehensive approach and to have actually quite a lot of strengths and quite little of weaknesses, which leads me to the biggest beauty of the SDGs. I mean, the biggest beauty is the holistic view and the comprehensive approach, but that is also the source to the fact how difficult it is. But anyhow, in order to tackle big, difficult problems, multiple problems, of course, you need strategic leadership. And that strategic leadership should always be rooted in data and facts. So in order to understand how interconnected different decisions are and how they impact climate and SDG targets, one must be able to trace back to single choices and their impacts. And that is something which is difficult, I mean, even for advanced societies and advanced cities. But in order to come with some concrete proposals or ideas, what should be done is, firstly, that in order really to succeed in holistic leadership, we must be able to better the digitalization and data collection capabilities of cities. And secondly, strategic leadership should also always be rooted in a well-educated staff. So city officials and workers should be engaged and educated about the climate targets and the SDGs, and recognize that every city employee has a role to play in these targets. So, I mean, every concrete steps forward in the field of data capabilities of cities which are working in the grassroots level, or the level of education of their staff, is something which really makes sense and can make a difference.
Excellent. Thanks for highlighting the importance of leadership and also education and knowledge and raising awareness about these issues at the local level. Vaidya, you already mentioned a number of challenges that cities are facing, including capacity building and financing. Here Jan mentioned strategic leadership and the importance of education. Would you agree that in the context of India, that has also been an issue? You mentioned that not a lot of cities are have the level of understanding of the importance of synergistic action between climate action and the SDGs. Are there any examples where this challenge is addressed?
Can you hear me? I think I lost you your last sentence. Okay, I just say that I'll go with the Jan and Jan's last sentence, which Jan said about we want to give a promised land to our country, and this promised land has to be smart, safe, sustainable, functional, and resilient. That's what Jan has said, and I believe, Jan, there is no one promised land. There are a number of promised land, but if this promised land, which we are trying to give that hope to the citizens, I think your point that they have to build by the capacity of the people at the local level who are delivering those services. And I think that is one of the crucial elements while we are talking about this big global growth, Paris Agreement, Sendai Framework, SDGs, New Urban Agenda, all of that, these global commitments are made. Global commitments will be only actioned at a city level, and the capacity at the city level at this moment of time is very, very weak. And as a National Institute of Urban Affairs, we are looking at this capacity. Again, a capacity is a very loose word. Wherever we are not getting, it has become a more of a abusive word than the usive word. But whenever we have to really see what type of capacity we are building. And I think what Jan talked about is we need to create these leaders on climate. And unless we create the champions and leaders at a climate at a local level, we will not be able to really sustain the momentum which SDGs and these global commitments have really initiated. So we are at an IUA looking at capacities at 5 broad areas. One is contextual research, which really brings the point which I don't want to give, which Soumya has really highlighted, as well as Jan has highlighted, has to be evidence-based. The data for a decision maker, where do I make a decision? How do I integrate this decision, this different siloed approach, like the data which we got it from climate assessment framework in 5 indicators, but how these 5 talk to each other. They cannot be, I can say that urban planning is good, mobility is there, but how I make the decision that how is urban planning not doing good is actually having a mobility and air quality. How waste management is it? So the integration of data, I think, is the crucial one. Second thing is training the practitioners. And I think, Jan, you highlighted very nicely about engaging with them, making them aware. And, they have to realize, the practitioners, and that's my last 4-5 years earlier with UN Habitat, and now with this National Institute of Urban Affairs, I have realized the city, we have this global SDGs, but they don't get percolated to the down, because every time the practitioners or a mayor or a thing at a city level, where their first question, what is there for me? Why should I do it? I'm already doing the practice. So how do you really engage? What he is doing is actually contributing to the larger commitment, because they don't see that what they are doing is actually contributing. So that relationship of a data with what they do to a commitment which any country has made, they should feel that they are owning it. And that's the ownership issue, and that will come from training and practice. Second thing is learning from the global best practices, peer-to-peer learning. I think that's the area where we need to build the capacities. I think knowledge management has been highlighted very nicely said. Last thing which I think is collaboration and partnerships, because nobody has an answer. What is that we want to do? And I'll go back to the Indian mythology, where Arjuna, who was the character in the one of the book called Bhagavad Gita, when he was asked to fight a war, and in the starting of war, he asked to be taken up to the middle of the ground, and he said, should I shoot or should I not shoot? He's totally confused. And at this moment of time, all of us are as confused as Arjuna was in that Bhagavad Gita, because we don't know what actions we are taking are we are leading to. But I think we definitely need to act. We definitely build on those actions based on evidence. And I think those confusions, those areas will only be, those clouds will be go away only if we build this evidence-based planning or evidence-based policy frameworks much more robust and doable and impactable. So that's where I think we should be working on. But I think, again, I re-emphasize my thing. We need to take these goals, these outcomes which we are envisaging down to the local level and make them the day-to-day operations of the urban local bodies and practitioners at the urban local governments. Because what we saw during the COVID, it was the action, and today when we are talking to each other, it was action by the city practitioners and city leaders that we could solve those issues and be out of the COVID scenario, even though still it is coming up, but at least mitigate those actions because of the hard work these local people, and that's a relationship between health. And first time I saw, in India particularly, the planning, urban development and health development started talking to each other. And that is what we have, the convergence at a local level, which has to happen. And that's why we need to go back to our governance structures at a local level, where the convergence can be facilitated. And the only instrument which can facilitate this convergence between the planning and climate is the legal documents, which is called master plan or city plans, whatever, in whichever country, where we have to start looking at these planning processes from different angles of inclusivity and sustainability. That's the only way we can reach to that promised land which we are talking about at this moment of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hitesh, for bringing up real examples of challenges that we face at the local level, and also highlighting the important role that partnerships plays in overcoming that. Imelda, from the perspective of climate smart agriculture and nature-based solutions, what are some of the challenges you see in pursuing a nexus approach?
Thank you for the question. My esteemed colleagues have already mentioned a lot of challenges that we are facing for Nexus work, and I don't want to repeat them, but let's remember the Paris Agreement has given space to a lot of sectors to represent themselves, where normally conventional parties, for example, or conference of parties, have been dominated by energy and forestry issues. We are very grateful that the Paris Agreement has opened up to several sectors. Agriculture is actually one of them, where Coronivia, Joint Work for Agriculture, is the landmark decision of UNFCCC for agriculture, on our agri-food system. So we were happy with that development. However, I'm just going to give practical examples. Turfing is still, in climate action, is still seen as under the purview solely of UNFCCC. And it's down at the local level or at the national level. It's so hard to bring negotiators, for example, from the sector to actually speak for their own sector with the technical knowledge that they have. Luckily, we are moving forward with this, and UNFCCC national teams are recognizing that there should be space for voices. And lastly, what I wanted that's probably not mentioned is that, as we move towards synergies and nexus work, we're not seeing that cross-sectoral work is a full-time job. So cross-sectoral collaboration is just seen as something, an add-on to your existing work. So I think that discussions like this, conferences like this, inch us closer towards this cross-sectoral collaboration. And so I think it's about time that all of us stakeholders really see cross-sectoral collaboration as a full-time work, not as an add-on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting cross-sectoral collaboration as well as the importance of connecting the local to the global. Mr. Suzuki, over to you. Similarly, from the perspective of biological diversity, biodiversity, nature-based solutions, a nexus approach to that in the SDGs. What are some of the challenges we see?
Thank you very much. Excellent question. And I would say lack of implementation is the largest and most challenging part of our issue. And even if we secure decent amount of fund, but it is never enough for the capacity building for the implementation. But at the same time, sometimes I feel that there is a lack of interest from the demand side as well. So in the keynote speech, I think that transformative change is possible. However, that requires maybe significant support, and maybe not only from the biodiversity side, but from the demand side. For example, this is, a very personal experience, but my favorite sushi restaurant closed during this pandemic after 37 years of operation. He can tell us where those fish are caught, and also the situation of the marine environment even. And in his last message to the customer, he mentioned his worry about climate change and ocean environment, and also his concern for the future generation. So in that sense, if the marine stock is healthy, we can enjoy very nice sushi at a very reasonable price. So it's a co-benefit of consumer and also sushi chefs and fishermen. So maybe we could expand our scope not only for the biodiversity, but food nexus, water nexus, and whole society approach. So maybe we should, I think this SDG arena is a perfect place to bring our knowledge and experience together. So that is my comment. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I do like the sushi example because I think one of the main challenges we face is actually effective communication on why we need to look at a particular issue from a holistic perspective. And a real example like that has impact and can cause one to act. So thank you for that. So this is the set of questions we had, the 2 rounds. Ms. Ramphel, you've listened to the discussions. I wondered if you have any thoughts about the conversations that we've had today.
Thank you very much. It's very encouraging to see that people are taking this challenge, this multiple planetary emergencies to heart, and people are working wherever they are to move us in a direction where we can act together, we can collaborate more. I like the comment about collaboration and cross-sectoral work and coordination. It needs to be part and parcel of the work that each of us is doing. But I think at the heart of what people have raised is a focus which I made in the speech, but we are not taking it forward. There is a need for cultural change, a shift in mindsets, because it's not that people don't know the benefits of decarbonizing, but people are not ready to give up the habits and the comforts which they regard as essential to their own way of or their lifestyles. The issue about energy, we can make the transition to clean energy, but if we continue to consume at the rate we are consuming, we are simply going to create more problems for the likes of the Democratic Republic of the Congo by having to take out more and more rare earth and destroy more and more of that ecology. So I think what I really appreciated about the comments that people have made today are the interlinkages. Whatever I do here in Cape Town has an impact on what happens in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and vice versa. Because at the end of the day, we are interconnected and interdependent. And if we bear that in mind and shift our outlooks, our cultural frames, I think we can move closer and closer towards that global equity for a healthy planet.
Thank you so much. And again, thanks for highlighting the importance of behavioral change across everything that we do and across the various sectors that we've talked about. I see that we're running out of time. I wonder if we can take maybe one question. No? Okay. So we have another session coming up, and thank you again to all the panelists for the very rich conversation, and thanks to our participants for joining us. Thank you very much.